They say the courtroom is where the truth comes to die buried under expensive suits and billable hours. Derek Montgomery walked into Superior Courtroom 4B, thinking he had already won. He had the high-priced lawyer, the hidden offshore accounts, and the younger mistress waiting in the car. He looked at his wife Vanessa sitting alone and silent, and saw nothing but a victim he was about to crush. But Derek forgot one thing: never judge a book by its cover, and never ever assume you own the ground you walk on. Because when the judge opened the final deed to the courthouse itself, the name on the paper didn't belong to the city. It belonged to the woman Derek was trying to destroy. And the rent was past due. The air in the courtroom tasted like stale coffee and lemon floor wax. It was the smell of bad news. But for Derek Montgomery, it smelled like victory. Derek adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit, glancing at his reflection in the polished mahogany of the defense table. He looked good. At 42, he had the jawline of a movie star and the bank account of a tech mogul. He checked his Rolex. 9:00 a.m. sharp. He wanted this over with by lunch. Brittany, his 24-year-old personal assistant, turned fiancé-in-waiting, had reservations at Le Bernardin for 12:30. "Stop fidgeting," his lawyer Arthur Paxson whispered. Paxson was a shark in a three-piece suit, a man who charged $600 an hour to destroy lives. "We have the prenup. We have the forensic accounting. She gets the Honda, you keep the portfolio. It's a slam dunk, Derek." "I just want her gone." "Art," Derek muttered, leaning back. "She's been dragging her feet for 6 months. It's pathetic." Across the aisle, Vanessa Caldwell sat quietly. She didn't look like a woman about to lose everything. She wore a simple charcoal blazer, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. No jewelry, no makeup. She looked tired, but her spine was steel straight. Beside her sat her attorney, a woman named Miss Green. Unlike Paxson, with his leather briefcase and flashy watch, Miss Green looked like a librarian who had wandered into a shark tank. She had a messy stack of files and a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Derek smirked. God, Vanessa really picked the bargain bin for legal representation, he thought. Just like she picked her clothes. When he had met Vanessa 10 years ago, she had been quiet then too. She was working in a bookstore in Seattle, studying history. Derek had been charmed by her simplicity. He liked being the provider, the savior. But as his wealth grew, Vanessa's silence stopped being charming and started being boring. She didn't like the galas. She didn't like the Hamptons. She preferred gardening and reading old, dusty maps. So he found Brittany. Brittany liked the galas. Brittany liked the noise. "All rise," the bailiff announced, his voice booming off the high ceilings. Judge Harland walked in. He was a terrifying man, 60 years old, with eyebrows like bushy caterpillars and a reputation for having zero patience for foolishness. He sat down, the heavy black robe settling around him like storm clouds. "Docket number 44-902. Judge Harland grunted, not looking up from his papers. "Montgomery versus Montgomery. Let's get on with it. I have a full calendar." Paxson stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Good morning, Your Honor. Arthur Paxson, representing the petitioner, Mr. Derek Montgomery. We are here to finalize the dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences. We have a prenuptial agreement signed 10 years ago that clearly outlines the division of assets." "I see it," Judge Harland said, flipping a page. "And the respondent." Ms. Green stood up, slowly. "Alicia Green, representing Mrs. Vanessa Caldwell Montgomery. Your Honor, we are contesting the validity of the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of non-disclosure of assets and— She paused, adjusting her glasses. Coercion. Derek let out a loud, scoffing laugh. The judge's head snapped up. His eyes narrowed on Derek. Is something funny, Mr. Montgomery? Derek froze. Paxson kicked him under the table. Apologies, Your Honor, Derek said, putting on his best, humble face. It's just coercion. I gave her everything. Sit down and be quiet, Judge Harland snapped. He turned back to Ms. Green. Counselor, that is a high bar. This prenup looks standard. Unless you have a smoking gun, I'm inclined to grant Mr. Montgomery's motion for summary judgment. We do have evidence, Your Honor, Ms. Green said, her voice soft but steady. But more importantly, there is a dispute regarding the primary marital residence. Mr. Montgomery is claiming the estate at 400 Oak Creek Drive. It's in my name, Derek whispered furiously to Paxson. The deed is in his name, Paxson said loudly. Purchased 3 years before the marriage. It is separate property. Technically, Ms. Green said. But the land is a different story. Derek rolled his eyes. This was her play. The land, Your Honor. Paxson sighed, feigning exhaustion. This is a stalling tactic. Mrs. Montgomery is simply trying to bleed my client dry in legal fees because she knows she has no claim to his fortune. She has no job, no income, and no contribution to the household finances in the last 5 years. Derek watched Vanessa. She didn't flinch. She just stared at the judge, her hands folded calmly in her lap. It unnerved him. Why wasn't she crying? Why wasn't she begging? He was discarding her like an old coat, and she was looking at him like he was the one in trouble. Ms. Green, Judge Harland said, taking off his glasses. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to make your case. If you can't prove why, we shouldn't enforce this prenup. I'm signing the decree today. Mr. Montgomery keeps the house, the accounts, and the cars. Mrs. Montgomery gets the statutory minimum. 10 minutes is all I need, Your Honor, Ms. Green said. She reached into her messy stack of files and pulled out a single yellowed piece of parchment sealed in plastic. Derek frowned. What is that? Arthur Paxson leaned over to Derek. Don't worry. It's probably some love letter or a sentimental card. Judges hate emotional appeals. She's desperate. Derek nodded, but his stomach tightened. Vanessa was a historian. She dealt in facts, not feelings. If she brought a piece of paper to court, it wasn't a poem. Your Honor, Ms. Green began walking toward the bench. My client does not want Mr. Montgomery's money. She is willing to waive her rights to the alimony. She is willing to waive her claim on the investment accounts in the Caymans, which, by the way, Mr. Montgomery failed to disclose, but we'll let that slide for a moment. Derek's face went pale. How did she know about the Cayman accounts? Paxson stiffened. Objection relevancy. Alleged hidden assets are overruled. Judge Harland said, his interest piqued. You're waiving claim to the hidden money. Why? Because, Miss Green said, placing the yellowed document on the judge's bench. My client is only interested in her birthright, specifically, the real property assets. The house is mine, Derek blurted out. I built it. I paid for the contractors. The structure, yes, Ms. Green agreed. You paid for the bricks and the mortar. But as Your Honor knows, real estate law is quite specific about the distinction between improvements and the land itself. Judge Harland picked up the document. He squinted at it. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic tapping of Paxson's pen against the table. "This is—" Judge Harland paused. "This is a land grant, dated 1895. "Correct," Ms. Green said. "It is the original deed for the entire district of Westhaven. It was granted to the Caldwell family for services rendered to the state. It has been passed down through the female line for 4 generations. It covers 400 acres. Derek laughed nervously. "So that's ancient history. I bought the lot from a developer." "You bought the lease," Vanessa spoke for the first time. Her voice was low melodic and terrifyingly calm. "You didn't read the fine print, Derek. You never read the fine print. You were too busy looking at the brochures." Paxson grabbed his papers, flipping through them frantically. "This is absurd. The title search was clear. Mr. Montgomery holds fee, simple title. He holds a 99-year leasehold interest," Mrs. Green corrected, "which according to the original covenant signed by your developer expires. Let me check." She pretended to look at her watch. "Yesterday." The judge looked from the old paper to Paxson, then to Derek. "Mr. Paxson, did you run a full historical title search going back to the original plat?" We went back the standard 40 years, Your Honor," Paxson stammered. "Lazy," Judge Harland muttered. He looked at the document again. "This appears to be authentic. It says the land creates a reversionary interest to the Caldwell estate upon the expiration of the lease term, meaning the land goes back to the owner." "And who is the executor of the Caldwell estate?" Paxson asked, sweat beading on his forehead. "My client," Ms. Green said. "Vanessa Caldwell." Derek stood up. "This is a trick. You're telling me she owns the land my house sits on." "She owns the land your house sits on," Ms. Green said. "And since the lease has expired and you have not renewed it under the terms of the covenant, any structures remaining on the land become the property of the landowner." Derek felt the room spin. She gets the house." "She gets the house," Judge Harland said, a small, grim smile touching his lips. "And the pool, and the garage, unless you want to pick them up and move them." "But that's not the drama, Your Honor," Vanessa said. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Derek can have the house. I don't want it. It has bad memories." Derek blinked. You don't want it?" "No," Vanessa said. "I want to talk about this building." "Excuse me," Judge Harland asked. "This courthouse," Vanessa said, gesturing to the high walls around them, "and the parking lot outside, and the police station next door." The silence in the courtroom was no longer just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of Derek's lungs. Even the court reporter stopped typing her hands, hovering over the keys. Judge Harland leaned forward, his bushy eyebrows knitting together. "Mrs. Montgomery, surely you are not suggesting—" "It's Miss Caldwell," Vanessa corrected gently. "And yes, Your Honor, if you look at the survey map attached to the grant on page 3. Judge Harland flipped the page. He traced a line with his finger. His eyes widened. He looked up at the ceiling of his own courtroom, then back down at the paper. "Well, I'll be damned," the judge whispered. "What?" Derek demanded. "What is it, Mr. Paxson?" Judge Harland said, his voice strangely tight. "It appears that the Westhaven Municipal Court, along with the adjacent municipal buildings, sits on Plot 4A of the Caldwell estate." "That's impossible," Paxson shouted. "The city owns this building." "The city owns the building," Ms. Green clarified. "Just like Derek owns his house. But the city pays, or should be paying, a ground rent. The lease for the municipal district was a separate agreement, signed in 1925 for exactly 100 years. 1925. Judge Harland did the math. 2025. It expired last week, Ms. Green said. The city is currently squatting on my client's private property, and according to the hard karma clause in the original 1925 agreement, our ancestors had a sense of humor. If the rent is not renegotiated immediately upon expiration, the penalty is substantial. Derek stared at his wife. She wasn't the mousy housewife he had ignored for years. She was a titan. She had been sitting on this information waiting. "Why?" Derek whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Vanessa turned to him. Her eyes were cold. "I tried to tell you, Derek. 3 years ago, when you wanted to build the extension on the garage. I told you, check the deed, Derek. You told me to go back to my gardening. You said I didn't understand business." "So," Vanessa continued, turning back to the judge, "here is where we stand. I am currently the landlord of this courtroom. I am the landlord of the police station where Derek's mistress, Brittany, just parked Derek's car in a judges-only spot. I can see it from the window." Judge Harland looked out the window. "Is that a G-Wagon in my spot?" "It is," Vanessa said, "and since I own the parking lot, I'd like it towed. I can't rule on a property dispute involving the court itself," Judge Harland stammered. "This is a conflict of interest. I have to recuse myself." "Actually, you don't," Ms. Green said. "Because this is still a divorce hearing. We are discussing marital assets versus separate property. My client is willing to make a deal." Derek felt a glimmer of hope. "A deal?" "Yes," Vanessa said. "I won't evict the court. I won't demand the city pay the millions in back rent penalties. I won't even take your house, Derek." "What do you want?" Derek asked, his voice trembling. "I want an admission," Vanessa said. "On the record. I want you to admit to the fraud regarding your business partners. I want you to admit you perjured yourself about the Cayman accounts. And I want you to sign over 50% of your company to the employees you fired last month to boost your stock price." "I can't do that," Derek screamed. "That's my legacy. That's everything." "Then I take the land," Vanessa said simply. "I take your house, and I shut down this courthouse for trespassing until the city negotiates a new lease with me. Imagine the news, Derek. Tech mogul's divorce causes city government shutdown. You think your stock price will survive that?" Derek looked at Paxson. Paxson was pale, shaking his head. "She's got us, Derek. If this deed is real, she's got the city by the throat. The mayor will crucify you if you let this become a public scandal." Derek looked at the judge. Judge Harland looked furious, not at Vanessa, but at Derek. "Mr. Montgomery," the judge growled, "if your marital disputes result in my courtroom being boarded up, I will personally make sure you spend the next 5 years in a cell for contempt. Fix this." Derek slumped into his chair. He looked at Vanessa. She looked radiant, powerful. "You planned this," he hissed. "No," she said. "I just read the fine print. You should try it sometime." But the drama wasn't over, just as Derek was reaching for the pen to sign the settlement. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. A woman in a tight red dress stumbled in, mascara running down her face. It was Brittany, and she wasn't alone. 2 police officers who worked in the station next door were holding her by the arms. "Derek!" she screamed. "Derek, do something! They found it! They found the bag in the trunk!" Derek froze. The pen hovered over the paper. Vanessa turned around slowly. a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She looked at Miss Green. "Did we mention that as the landowner I authorized a random security sweep of the parking lot premises today?" Miss Green checked her notes. "I believe we did." The courtroom, previously a theater of civil disputes, had transformed instantly into a crime scene. The bailiff moved to block the doors. Judge Harland was standing behind his bench, his face a mask of shock and fury. "Ms. Caldwell," the judge boomed, his voice echoing off the wood paneling. "Explain this immediately. Why are local police dragging a civilian into my courtroom in the middle of a divorce decree?" Vanessa remained seated, the picture of tranquility amidst the chaos. She smoothed a crease in her charcoal skirt. "I apologize for the disruption, Your Honor, but as the owner of the property, I have a liability to ensure no illegal trafficking occurs on the premises. My security team, which I hired at 9:01 a.m. this morning, flagged a vehicle with expired registration. It happened to belong to Mr. Montgomery." Derek was gripping the edge of the defense table so hard, his knuckles were white. "This is harassment." "You planted something." Brittany was sobbing now, her mascara creating black rivers down her cheeks. "I didn't know. He told me to move the bags. He said it was just tax papers." "Silence!" The officer, a burly man with a nameplate reading Sergeant O'Malley, stepped forward. "Your Honor, we found 3 duffel bags in the trunk of the G-Wagon. They contain approximately $2 million in cash and several hard drives labeled Cayman Holdings." The heir left the room. Arthur Paxson. Derek's shark of a lawyer slowly closed his briefcase. He took a half step away from Derek. It was a subtle move, but in the legal world, it was the equivalent of a rat jumping off a sinking ship. "Art," Derek whispered, his voice cracking. "Do something." "I represent you in civil matters, Derek," Paxson said, his voice cold and professional. "This is a criminal matter. I advise you to remain silent." "Tax papers?" Vanessa asked, her voice cutting through the noise. She stood up and walked toward Brittany. The mistress shrank back. She had spent the last year mocking Vanessa on social media, posting photos of herself in Vanessa's vacation homes, wearing Vanessa's old jewelry. She had called Vanessa old, washed up, and boring. Now, looking into the eyes of the woman she had tormented, Brittany looked like a child. "He made me do it," Brittany whimpered. "Vanessa, please. He said he was going to hide the liquidity before the divorce was final. He said you were too stupid to find it." "I see," Vanessa said. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply looked at Derek with a disappointment that was heavier than anger. "You underestimated me, Derek. That was your first mistake. But your second mistake was assuming I didn't know about the accounts." Vanessa turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the hard karma clause of the 1925 Land Covenant has a subsection regarding criminal enterprise. If the tenant uses the land for illegal acts, the lease isn't just expired. It is retroactively voided." Judge Harland sat back down, rubbing his temples. Which means, Ms. Green interjected. "That technically, Mr. Montgomery has been trespassing on Ms. Caldwell's property since the moment he parked that car with the stolen funds. We are pressing charges for criminal trespass in addition to the federal charges I assume the sergeant will be filing regarding the embezzlement." Derek looked at the judge. "You can't let her do this. I'm a pillar of this community." "You are a tenant," Judge Harland corrected him sharply, "and a bad one at that. Sergeant O'Malley, take Mr. Montgomery into custody. I'm revoking bail due to flight risk. The man has a trunk full of cash and a private jet on standby." As the officers moved to cuff Derek, he lunged toward Vanessa. It was a desperate, flailing motion. "I made you," he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "You were nothing but a clerk when I found you. You're nothing without me." Vanessa didn't flinch. She watched as they dragged him away. His expensive Italian suit bunching up around his shoulders, his dignity left somewhere on the floorboards. When the doors slammed shut, the silence returned. Judge Harland exhaled a long breath. He looked at Vanessa with a newfound respect. "Ms. Caldwell, in 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a dismantle like that. Now about the courthouse rent." Vanessa smiled. "Don't worry, Judge. I'm sure the city and I can come to a reasonable arrangement. I'm not unreasonable. I just want what's mine." 3 days later, the rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Montgomery Tech boardroom. The city of Seattle looked gray and washed out below, but inside the atmosphere was electric. The board of directors sat around the long glass table. These were men and women who controlled billions of dollars. There was Lawrence P. Worthington, the chairman, a man who had survived 3 hostile takeovers. There was Cynthia Davis, the CFO, who was currently sweating through her silk blouse. And there was Franklin Stone, the company's PR crisis manager. They were waiting for the new majority shareholder. When the doors opened, they didn't see Derek Montgomery. Derek was currently sitting in a holding cell at the county jail, a jail, ironically, that was built on land Vanessa also owned. Instead, Vanessa walked in. She wasn't wearing the grey, modest clothes of the courtroom. She wore a tailored crimson suit that screamed power. Her hair was loose, cascading in dark curls around her shoulders. She carried no files, no briefcase, just a single cup of coffee. Ms. Green walked a step behind her, carrying the paperwork. "Gentlemen, Cynthia," Vanessa said, taking the seat at the head of the table. The seat that had been Derek's for 15 years. "I trust we've all seen the news." "This is highly irregular," Lawrence Worthington blustered. He was an older man with silver hair and a face that turned red when he was challenged. "Vanessa, we appreciate your situation, but running a tech conglomerate is not the same as running a bookstore. We are preparing a buyout offer to remove you from the cap table." Vanessa took a sip of her coffee. She set the cup down with a soft clink. "A buyout," she repeated. "With what money, Lawrence?" "The stock has plummeted 40% since Derek's arrest. The SEC is raiding the server rooms as we speak. If you buy me out now, you bankrupt the company." "We have reserves," Cynthia said, her voice trembling. "You had reserves," Vanessa corrected. "Derek drained them. That's what was in the trunk. The Cayman accounts were company operational funds disguised as R&D write-offs." A gasp went around the table. They hadn't known the extent of it. "So," Vanessa continued, leaning forward, "here is the reality. The company is insolvent. The reputation is in tatters. The only asset this company has left that is worth anything is the land the headquarters sits on. And guess who owns that?" Franklin Stone, the PR man, put his head in his hands. "The Caldwell estate." "Correct," Vanessa said. "I own the ground beneath your feet. I own the parking garage. I own the fiber optic lines running under the street for the first 2 blocks. I could evict Montgomery Tech tomorrow and turn this building into a greenhouse if I wanted to." "What do you want?" Lawrence asked, his bluster gone. He looked old and defeated. "I want a restructuring," Vanessa said. "First, we change the name. Montgomery Tech is dead. The brand is toxic." "To what?" Phoenix Innovations, she said, rising from the ashes. Second, I want the immediate resignation of everyone who signed off on Derek's Special Projects Fund. She looked directly at Cynthia. Cynthia flinched. I was following orders. You were an accomplice, Vanessa said coldly. You can resign with your pension, or you can explain to the FBI why you authorized transfers to a shell company in 1999. Cynthia stood up, gathered her purse, and walked out without a word. Third, Vanessa said, turning to the rest of the board, we are implementing an employee ownership model. The 50% of the stock that I reclaimed from Derek, I'm distributing half of it to the staff, the engineers, the janitors, the support team, the people Derek treated like furniture. That's socialism, Lawrence shouted. The shareholders will revolt. The shareholders are holding worthless paper right now, Vanessa snapped. This is the only way to save the company. We need loyalty. We need the staff to work harder than they ever have to rebuild this. If they own a piece of it, they will. She stood up, walking to the window. She looked out at the city. She saw her reflection in the glass, a black woman who had been told her whole life to be quiet, to be grateful to stay in the background. My great-grandfather, Jeremiah Caldwell, bought this land when he wasn't even allowed to enter the buildings that stood on it, Vanessa said softly. He worked as a janitor in a courthouse where he couldn't testify against a white man. He saved every penny. He bought the marshland that nobody wanted because he knew the city would grow. She turned back to the room. Her eyes were blazing. He played the long game, and so have I. Derek thought he was the king because he made a quick fortune, but he forgot that kings fall. The land remains. She placed her hands on the table. I am the chairwoman of the board now. If you don't like my terms, the door is there. But if you walk out, remember I own the sidewalk too, and I will trespass you. Lawrence stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. The motion carries, he grunted. Welcome to the board, Ms. Caldwell. 6 months had passed since the gavel fell in Judge Harlan's courtroom, but the echoes of that day were still reshaping the skyline of West Haven. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling glass of the corner office on the 42nd floor. This had been Derek's sanctuary, a fortress of chrome and black leather, where he played God with people's livelihoods. Now the space was unrecognizable. The black leather was replaced with warm earth tones and cream armchairs. The walls, once covered in ego-stroking magazine covers of Derek, were now lined with framed architectural blueprints of the city from the 1800s maps that showed the original Caldwell footprint. Vanessa stood at the window watching the grey city below. She wore a tailored suit in a deep, regal plum color, a stark contrast to the invisible grey she used to wear. Ms. Caldwell. Vanessa turned. Her new assistant, a young man named Leo, stood in the doorway, holding a tablet. The quarterly earnings call starts in 10 minutes. The shareholders are actually excited about the Phoenix Community Initiative. The stock is up another 4 points. Thank you, Leo, Vanessa said, a soft smile playing on her lips. Tell the board I'll be right there, and send a basket of muffins to the IT department. I heard they pulled an all-nighter fixing the server migration. Leo blinked. Derek, Mr. Montgomery never sent muffins. He usually just sent threats. We aren't Montgomery Tech anymore, Vanessa reminded him gently. We are Phoenix Innovations. We rise together. When Leo left, Vanessa touched the necklace she was wearing. It was a simple gold locket containing a tiny faded photo of her grandmother, Nana Rose. The company was thriving not because Vanessa was a tech genius, but because she applied the logic of a historian, learn from the past, treat the foundation with respect, and the structure will hold. Derek, however, was learning a very different lesson about foundations. Across town, in a part of the city that definitely did not sit on Caldwell land, Derek Montgomery sat on the edge of a sagging mattress in the Starlight Motel. The neon sign outside buzzed with a dying flicker, casting a sickly pink light into his room. He looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror above the dresser. He looked 10 years older. His hairline was receding. His skin was sallow, and the expensive veneer of the tech mogul had completely eroded. It wasn't just the legal trouble, though, that was bad enough. The SEC had frozen his personal accounts. His lawyers had quit one by one as the checks bounced. But it was worse than that. It was the luck. Ever since the day in court, the universe seemed to have turned hostile toward him. It started small. His coffee machine exploded the morning after the trial. His brand-new car, a rental since the G-Wagon was impounded, had suffered 3 flat tires in 1 week on smooth roads. He walked into glass doors that should have opened. Deals that were 99% done suddenly fell apart because of lost emails or corrupted files. It felt like gravity itself was heavier around him. He picked up his phone. The screen was cracked. He pulled up the contact he had sworn never to call. Vanessa. He typed the message, his thumbs shaking. It took him 10 minutes to hit send. He had to swallow a lump of pride, so large it felt like choking. Meet me. Please. Just 10 minutes. Chez Pierre, 8 p.m. I have information about the company. It was a lie. He had no information. He had nothing. But he needed to see her. He needed to understand why the sun was shining on her while he was drowning in the rain. Chez Pierre was the kind of restaurant where the menus didn't have prices and the waiters spoke better French than the tourists in Paris. It was where Derek had proposed to Vanessa, not because it was romantic, but because it was the most expensive table in the city. He arrived early, wearing the only suit he had left. It was wrinkled, and there was a small stain on the lapel he couldn't scrub out. The maitre d', a man named Gustavo, who had known Derek for 15 years, stopped him at the podium. "Mr. Montgomery." Gustavo said, his voice stiff. We didn't expect to see you." "I have a table," Derek snapped, trying to summon his old arrogance. "Corner booth." "That table is reserved for VIPs," Gustavo said coolly. "I can seat you near the kitchen." Derek opened his mouth to scream, to fire him to buy the building. But then he remembered. He couldn't fire anyone. He couldn't buy a sandwich without checking his balance. "Fine," Derek muttered. "Just seat me." He was nursing a glass of tap water when Vanessa walked in. The restaurant seemed to quiet down. She didn't just walk. She glided. The maitre d' rushed to greet her, beaming, bowing low. She whispered something to him, and Gustavo immediately led her not to the VIP booth, but to the small, obscured table near the kitchen where Derek was hiding. She sat down. She didn't take off her coat. She looked at him not with anger, but with the distant curiosity of a scientist looking at a bug in a jar. "You look tired, Derek," she said. "I'm fighting a war," he rasped. "The prosecutor is out for blood. The press is camping on my lawn. Well, the motel lawn." "You called me," Vanessa said, checking her watch. "You said you had information." "I lied," Derek admitted. He leaned in his eyes, wit and manic. "I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. No lawyer talk." Vanessa folded her hands on the table. "Go on." "What did you do to me?" "I divorced you," she said. "No." Derek slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. A waiter looked over, alarmed. Derek lowered his voice to a hiss. "It's not just the divorce. It's everything. Since you left, nothing works. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I dropped my toast this morning, and it landed butter side down on my shoe. Every single stoplight turns red when I approach. It's like I'm cursed." He looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Did you curse me, Vanessa? Did your family? Do something." Vanessa stared at him for a long moment. Then she let out a soft, sad laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who finally sees the punchline of a very long joke. "You think I cursed you?" she asked. "Derek, you give yourself too much credit. I didn't spend a second thinking about you after I signed the papers." "Then explain it," he begged. "Why is my life falling apart while you turn into Midas?" Vanessa reached into her purse. Derek flinched, as if expecting a weapon. She pulled out a small, worn velvet pouch. It was tied with a leather string. It looked old, dusty, and completely out of place on the white linen tablecloth. "Do you remember this?" she asked. Derek squinted. "That dirty bag, you used to keep it in the nightstand. I told you to throw it out 100 times. I thought it was potpourri." "It's not potpourri," Vanessa said softly. She placed her hand over the pouch. "It's soil. Dirt. Soil," she corrected. "From the garden of the original Caldwell homestead. The land my great-grandfather bought with his blood money from the war. My grandmother Nana Rose gave this to me on our wedding day. She didn't like you, Derek. She said you had hungry eyes. But she told me that as long as I kept this soil in our home, the house would stand. The roof would hold. The money would flow." Derek stared at the pouch. A shiver ran down his spine. "So it's magic." "It's not magic, you fool," Vanessa said, her voice sharpening. "It's a blessing. It's a connection. It represents the prayers of 4 generations of people who survived things you can't even imagine. It represents integrity, resilience, faith." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "When we were married, Derek, you were living under my canopy. You were benefiting from my protection. You thought your success was all you, your genius, your charm. But it wasn't. You were walking on a path my ancestors cleared for me. You were warm because you were standing next to my fire." She picked up the pouch and tucked it back into her pocket. "When you moved Brittany into our bed, when you tried to steal the land, I took the pouch. I took the protection with me." Derek felt the blood drain from his face. "So, I'm not cursed?" "No," Vanessa said. "You're just exposed. You're experiencing life without the buffer, Derek. This is what the world is actually like when you don't have someone praying for you. It's cold, it's random, and it doesn't care about your ego." Derek slumped back in his chair. The realization hit him harder than any lawsuit. He hadn't been a king. He had been a guest. And he had been a terrible guest. "Can I?" His voice cracked. He sounded like a child. "Can I have a little bit? Just a pinch. Please, Vanessa. I'm drowning." Vanessa stood up. She smoothed her coat. She looked down at him, and for a second he saw the woman who used to love him. But that woman was gone, buried under years of neglect. "The protection isn't something I can give you, Derek," she said. "It's earned. You have to plant your own garden if you want the shade." She signaled Gustavo. "Check for table 22. I'm paying." "Vanessa," Derek called out as she turned to leave. "What am I supposed to do?" She paused, half turning. The light from the kitchen framed her in a halo of steam and gold. "I suggest you start praying, Derek," she said. And maybe for the first time in your life, try telling the truth. It's the only soil where anything real can grow. She walked out. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind her, leaving Derek alone with his glass of lukewarm water and the crushing weight of his own choices. Outside, the rain had stopped. The moon was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the wet pavement that, unbeknownst to the rest of the world, belonged to the woman walking on it. She took a deep breath of the cool air, checked her phone, and saw the confirmation for her flight to London. But there was one final gatekeeper waiting for her at the airport, one last ghost from the past who thought money could buy history. The VIP lounge at Westhaven International Airport was a world away from the grimy holding cells of the county jail. It smelled of expensive Scotch leather and quiet privilege. Vanessa walked through the frosted glass doors, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. She had her boarding pass for the overnight flight to London in one hand and her phone in the other. Ms. Green had texted her a final confirmation. The wire transfer from the city comptroller has cleared. You are now liquid to the tune of $50 million in back rent. Have a safe flight. $50 million. It was a number that didn't feel real. To her great-grandfather, Jeremiah, $50 would have been a fortune. She felt the weight of the history in her chest, a warm, solid thing. She approached the bar and ordered a sparkling water with a twist of lime. She just wanted to sit in the corner, watch the planes take off, and breathe for the first time in 10 years. "Ms. Caldwell," a deep, gravelly voice said from the shadows of a high-backed leather chair. "Or do you prefer Mrs. Montgomery? I suppose the ink is dry on the divorce decree, so Caldwell it is." Vanessa froze. She knew that voice. It was a voice she had heard on the news, a voice that commanded boardrooms and Senate hearings. She turned slowly. Sitting in the chair, swirling a glass of amber liquid, was Clinton Prescott. Clinton Prescott was not just a businessman. He was the businessman. He owned the construction firms that built the skyline. He owned the politicians who zoned the land. He was the man Derek had always wanted to be, the man Derek worshipped. He was 70 years old, with skin like tanned leather and eyes like chips of blue ice. "Mr. Prescott," Vanessa said, keeping her face neutral. "I didn't know you were flying commercial." "I'm not," Prescott said, gesturing to the tarmac outside the window where a sleek black Gulfstream jet was idling. "I'm flying private. I just came in here because I saw your name on the manifest. I own the airline, you see. I like to know who is coming and going in my city." "It's not your city, Mr. Prescott," Vanessa said, taking a sip of her water. "As we recently established in court, a significant portion of the downtown district actually belongs to me." Prescott chuckled. It wasn't a nice sound. It sounded like dry leaves being crushed. "Ah, yes. The deed. The 1895 land grant. Very clever, Vanessa. May I call you Vanessa? You caught poor Derek with his pants down, literally and figuratively." "Derek caught himself," Vanessa said. "I just turned on the lights." "True," Prescott agreed. He stood up, towering over her. "Derek was a useful idiot. He had ambition but no vision. I used him to consolidate the tech sector. But when he started embezzling, he became a liability. I'm actually glad you took him out. Saved me the trouble of firing him." Vanessa felt a chill run down her spine. "Is there a point to this conversation, Mr. Prescott? My flight board's in 20 minutes. "The point," Prescott said, stepping closer, "is that you have something I want. And unlike Derek, I don't ask nicely." "The land?" Vanessa said flatly. "The land," Prescott confirmed. Specifically, the 400 acres horse beneath the municipal district. You see, Vanessa holding the city hostage for rent is a cute trick. But I have a development plan for that district. High-rise condos, luxury retail, a stadium. I can't build my legacy if I have to pay ground rent to a bookstore clerk. I'm the CEO of Phoenix Innovations, Vanessa corrected him. You're a placeholder, Prescott sneered. Now here is the offer. I will buy the deed from you, right now. $100 million. Cash. You get on that plane, you go to London, and you live like a queen. You never come back to West Haven. And if I refuse, Prescott smiled. It was a predator's smile. If you refuse, I will invoke eminent domain. I have the mayor in my pocket. I have the governor on speed dial. We will declare your land blighted or essential for public use. We will seize it, and the court will award you fair market value, which I will ensure is pennies on the dollar. You will spend the next 10 years in litigation, and you will lose. You beat Derek because he was stupid. You won't beat me. Vanessa stared at him. The lounge was quiet. The bartender was polishing a glass, pretending not to hear. This was the final test. Derek had been the storm, but Prescott was the mountain, immovable, cold. Vanessa set her glass down on the marble counter. She didn't look afraid. She looked amused. You know, Mr. Prescott, she began softly. You rich men always make the same mistake. You think history started the day you were born. You think you can rewrite the past with a checkbook. I don't rewrite history, Prescott said. I pave over it. You threatened eminent domain, Vanessa said, reaching into her purse. She didn't pull out a phone or a weapon. She pulled out a small leather-bound book. It was old, the spine cracking, the pages yellowed. Do you know what this is? Prescott glanced at it dismissively. A diary. It's the field journal of Captain Josiah Halloway, Vanessa said. He was the Union officer who originally surveyed the land in 1865, right after the war. I don't care about the Civil War, Prescott snapped. I care about the Zoning Commission. You should care, Vanessa said, because Captain Halloway didn't just survey the land. He discovered something on it, Plot 4A, the exact plot where the courthouse and your proposed stadium would sit. She opened the book to a marked page. In 1865, Halloway found a burial ground, Vanessa read. Not just any burial ground, a mass grave of freedmen, men and women who died in the typhus outbreak of 1864 while fleeing north. My ancestors. Prescott's eyes narrowed. So we move the bodies. We do it all the time. You can't, Vanessa said, because in 1895, when Jeremiah Caldwell bought the land, he didn't just get a deed. He applied for a federal designation. The land isn't just private property, Mr. Prescott. It was designated a federal historical sanctuary under the Preservation Act of 1890. It was a secret provision kept out of the local records to protect the graves from men like you. Prescott paused. He looked at the book. That's a lie. My title searchers would have found it. Your title searchers were looking at county records, Vanessa said. This is in the National Archives. I'm a historian. Remember, I know where to look. She closed the book with a snap. Federal land cannot be seized by eminent domain for commercial development, she said, her voice ringing with authority. You can't build your condos, you can't build your stadium, and you certainly can't pave over my family. Prescott's face turned a shade of purple she had never seen before. I will bury you in lawsuits. I will bankrupt you. No, you won't, Vanessa said calmly. Because if you try to sue me, I will release this journal to the press. I will show the world that Clinton Prescott wants to dig up the graves of freed slaves to build a shopping mall. Imagine the headlines, Clinton. Imagine the protests. Your stock will crash harder than Derek's did." Prescott stood there, his mouth opening and closing. He was a man who had fought unions, regulators, and rivals, but he had no weapon against the truth. "You're bluffing," he whispered. "Try me," Vanessa said. "Go ahead. Call the mayor. Tell him you want to desecrate a federal sanctuary. See if he stays in your pocket." For a long minute, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator behind the bar. Prescott stared at Vanessa, searching for a crack in her armor. He found none. He saw only the steel of the Caldwell women passed down through generations. Finally, Prescott let out a short, bitter laugh. He picked up his scotch and downed it in one gulp. "You're a dangerous woman, Vanessa Caldwell," he said. "I'm a protective woman," she replied. "There is a difference." "Keep the land," Prescott spat. "It's just dirt anyway." "To you it's dirt," Vanessa said. "To me it's blood." Prescott turned and stormed out of the lounge, his entourage scrambling to keep up. He looked smaller than he had when he walked in. Vanessa let out a breath she felt she had been holding for a lifetime. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline of the kill. She had faced the final boss, and she had won. She picked up her phone and dialed Ms. Green. "Alicia." "I'm here, Vanessa. Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," Vanessa said, looking out at the runway lights twinkling in the darkness. "But I have one more instruction for the trust." "Go ahead." "The courthouse," Vanessa said. "I don't want the rent money to just sit in an account. I want to set up a scholarship fund for history students, specifically for those studying property law and civil rights." "Done," Ms. Green said. "What should we call it?" Vanessa smiled. "Call it the Fine Print Scholarship." "Perfect," Ms. Green laughed. "And Vanessa." "Yes." "Derek called from jail. He's trying to get a public defender. Apparently he doesn't qualify for legal aid, because technically on paper, he's still married to a millionaire until the clock strikes midnight. "Tell him," Vanessa said, her voice cool and final, "that he should have read the prenup. Clause 14. In the event of criminal indictment, all spousal support obligations are immediately severed." "You really did think of everything," Ms. Green marveled. "No," Vanessa said, watching her plane pull up to the gate. "I didn't think of everything. I just listened. To the land. To the stories. To the silence." She hung up the phone. The flight attendant announced the boarding for Flight 808 to London. Vanessa picked up her bag. She didn't look back at the city. She didn't need to. The city was hers now in a way it had never been Derek's or Prescott's. She owned the ground. But more importantly, she owned herself. As she walked down the jet bridge, she remembered the soil in her pocket. She patted it gently. "We did it, Nana," she whispered. "We finally paid the rent." The cell was cold and smelled of mildew. Derek Montgomery sat on the thin mattress, staring at the concrete wall. He had spent his life surrounded by noise, the hum of servers, the chatter of parties, the applause of sycophants. Now the silence was deafening. His cellmate, a large man named Tiny, who was in for grand theft, Otto looked down from the top bunk. "Hey," Tiny grunted. "You hear that?" "Hear what?" Derek asked, his voice hoarse. "The news," Tiny said, pointing to the small, flickering TV mounted in the corner of the cell block. Derek looked up. The news ticker was running across the bottom of the screen. Breaking news. Phoenix Innovations announces Record Q. 3 profits under new leadership. CEO Vanessa Caldwell donates $50 million to Historical Preservation Fund. Derek closed his eyes. "That's my wife," he whispered. "Ex-wife," Tiny corrected him. "And hey, looks like she's giving away your money." Derek laughed. It was a broken, jagged sound. "No," he said. "It was never my money. I just held it for a while." "Karma's a beast, ain't it?" Tiny said, rolling over. Derek looked at his hands. He had had it all. The perfect life. The perfect lie. But he had built his castle on sand, while Vanessa had built hers on rock. He curled up on the hard cot, pulling the scratchy blanket up to his chin. Outside, the rain began to fall on the roof of the jail that sat on the land of the woman he had betrayed. Even here, he was her guest. And for the first time in his life, Derek Montgomery understood the value of a lease. The story of Vanessa Caldwell and Derek Montgomery isn't just about a divorce. It's a reminder that true power isn't about the car you drive or the suit you wear. It's about knowing your history, reading the fine print, and never underestimating the quiet person in the room. Derek thought he could discard Vanessa because she was boring. But he failed to realize that her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. In the end, the very ground he stood on rose up to reclaim what was stolen. It's a classic case of hard karma. You can't build a future if you don't respect the past. Wow. Talk about a mic drop moment at the airport. Vanessa really showed them that knowledge is the ultimate weapon. What would you have done in Vanessa's shoes? Would you have taken the buyout money from Prescott? Or would you have held on to the land to protect your history? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story about karma, betrayal, and redemption. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.